Welcome to our conversation tonight. We're going to be talking about creativity. And in particular, we're going to be talking about creativity as a way of keeping us from burning out, as a way of keeping us from pushing too hard, trying to force things to happen when the timing's not right or when we don't have the energy for it. And most importantly, we're going to be talking about stepping into your purpose and stepping into your purpose in a little bit of a different way than maybe you have been trained to, or we're going to talk about it in a little bit of a different way because the way in which we talk about purpose, I think, is evolving. And what we need to know to deepen the expression of our purpose, to be more in alignment with who we are and what we're here to do, all of those pieces are being redefined. And I want to support you tonight in the conversation that we have in exploring other ways in which you might already be fulfilling your purpose and maybe you're not giving yourself credit for it, and other ways in which you can perhaps deepen the full expression of your purpose so that you're living a more meaningful and purposeful life. Research shows that when you live a more purposeful and meaningful life, then you are happier. You're healthier. You actually upregulate your DNA expression. You are more attractive. You attract more things into your life that match what you really want. And, life just feels more juicy. Not only that, you actually get to do what you came here to do when you're living aligned with your purpose. So let's get rolling here. Welcome to Awakening Your Quantum Creativity. Some of what we talk about tonight is stuff that you might already know, or stuff that you might have already been thinking about or studying about. I want to just revisit some of this material. And part of why I want to revisit some of this material is because I think that in a year like 2020, when the external environment feels very disruptive and chaotic, it's very easy to let the external appearances of what's happening cause you to forget your innate creative power. And if you have forgotten, or if you've been going through a rough patch, I want you to first and foremost be gentle with yourself. This is a very interesting time, and it is a very intense and purposeful time. And I think that it's really okay and actually really normal if sometimes we forget that we are these powerful creative beings and we drop into our really dense finite humanness and have, a couple of bad weeks or a couple of bad days. It's okay. It's normal. I would love for us to really invite a new perspective on ascension, if you will, that has a spiral quality to it, which means some days you get it right. Some days, I don't want to use the word right. Some days it feels more aligned. Some days it's a little bit more of a challenge, and it's all okay. It's still leading us upward. We're going to start first with a little bit of a history lesson, because I think that this history lesson is going to help you remember why you're here. It's going to help you understand a little bit of what's really up on the planet right now. And most importantly, it's going to connect you to some new perspectives, I'm hoping, that will really help you shift into a greater awareness of what your role is right now and what you need to do to really be able to activate your role. We're going to start first by talking about Newtonian physics, which really is the physics of the physical world brought to us by Sir Isaac Newton. These discoveries that Sir Isaac Newton made, which are qualified or typically called physics, general physics. This is the physics that some of you may have studied in high school. This physics and the discoveries that Sir Isaac Newton made actually came at the tail end of the scientific revolution. The scientific revolution happened because somewhere about 300 to 400 years ago, we got sick of being suspicious, superstitious, and we got really curious about how the physical world operates. The reason why we got curious is because our consciousness evolved. And what takes place in the material world is an after effect, if you will, of our shift in consciousness. As our consciousness evolved during the scientific revolution and after, we began to explore our role in the physical world because we started to understand the material world from a different point of view. We began to understand that we could move things around in the material world and get different results. We could create systems and order and formulas in the material world and get consistent, at least semi-consistent results. We also began to understand that we have more sovereignty over our life than perhaps we had before the scientific revolution. Before the scientific revolution, when we were operating out of more superstitious belief systems, if you will, to a certain degree, we were a victim of the outer reality. We didn't understand how it worked. We kind of had to just react to it. And as we gained a deeper understanding of our own personal sovereignty, our own will, if you will, we began to be able to interpret that as an ability to manipulate and understand the material world. Hallmarks of the consciousness of this era that is actually on its way out. We're in the midst of a huge evolution, and this consciousness is changing. It's evolving. Hallmarks of material consciousness or Newtonian consciousness include things that we measure by finite amounts and solutions, fixed laws with probable, possible, and predictable results, formulas, reasoning, logic, nature and natural law. And of course, deeply embedded in this consciousness was a need and a drive and a desire for certainty. Evolution is the imperative of consciousness. So when our consciousness evolves, the way in which we interact and the way in which we understand the world and the way in which because we now know, because of material consciousness, that we have more sovereignty over our lives than we thought before, the more we shift and change and grow in consciousness, the more our understanding of the world grows and evolves. And it's a little bit more deliberate maybe than we were taught in school. We are now emerged into the beginning phases of what I'll call the quantum era. The quantum era, again, just so that we have the order of cause and effect really clear, the quantum era happened because our consciousness shifts again. It shifted again. It's always shifting. We are in the midst of a huge shift in consciousness, and the beginning of this huge shift in consciousness was really kind of marked by the introduction of a science officially recognized as an official science in the late 1800s as quantum physics. Quantum physics is kind of the demarcation line of the beginning of the quantum era that is a new way of understanding how the world works based on our evolution and growth in consciousness. The quantum era really started to gain traction in the 1920s, and we saw hand in hand with this emergence of the quantum era, the New Thought movement. We saw, for those of you who are familiar with Unity Church of Christianity or Science of Mind, we saw thinkers in the New Thought movement such as Ernest Holmes, Edgar Cayce, a little bit later, Madame Blavatsky a little bit earlier, Rudolf Steiner, Maria Montessori also a little bit later. The root theme that came into being through these new evolutions of thought forms is the idea that your thoughts create your reality. Okay, your thoughts create your reality. We had Napoleon Hill wrote a book around this time. You may be familiar with this book called Think and Grow Rich. This idea that your thoughts, your attitude, your perspective, what you look at, what you notice, what you focus on, all of these ideas are relatively new in the history of the human story. This idea really started to gain traction as we emerged into the quantum era. We also learned that we're all connected by virtue of a quantum field. So we started to cultivate a science around the idea of unity. We learned that we can create non-locally, meaning we can create effects in our outer reality, and it doesn't mean we have to physically necessarily do it. We evolved into an idea of fundamental creativity. We began to cultivate a new way to measure value. And this is huge and hugely important, especially this year. So in the material world, in the material consciousness, we measured value by things and stuff and money and numbers, right? Science is all about numbers and probability and statistics and how much. And that translated to a measurement of value around money and resources and numbers, right? And that translated into a sense of self-worth that was deeply tied to the numbers of your life. So our self-worth began to be measured by how much stuff do we have? How much money do we have? What's the size of your pants? What number is that? How many years of education do you have? How much did you pay for your car? These numbers, these metrics defined our personal value. As we began to move into the quantum era, this era that we are really beginning to accelerate our energy movement into, as we moved into the quantum era, we began to rethink this idea that the value of life could be quantified by a number or stuff. That maybe the value of life is measured by its inherent preciousness. And that if we build a world that reflects that preciousness, if we build a world that is based on the idea that every living sentient being is valuable and inherently valuable because it exists, and that if you are a living, breathing thing, you are inherently precious. And if we begin to build a world that reflects that core principle, an economy that reflects that principle, institutions that reflect that principle, ways of being in relationship with each other that reflects that principle, ways of building community that reflects that core principle, then we begin to measure value not by numbers, but by the quality of well-being that we experience and the quality of well-being that we generate and give to the world. And of course, also emerging in this 1920s beginning of the quantum era, we saw the idea that change and uncertainty and potential are okay, that we don't have to know everything. It's okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to not have figured out the dream. Everything in our world right now comes into being because we dream it first into being in some way, shape, or form. We would never have gone to the moon or had light bulbs without dreams. And the quantum era began the process of helping us recognize that our dreams are just as much of an important component to the creative process as the work that we do in the material world. So we started off this conversation about creativity. So let's talk a little bit about what creativity is, and specifically, what is quantum creativity? So before we start talking about quantum creativity, we have to talk about two different kinds of creativity. The first kind of creativity that we're going to talk about is called situational creativity. And the second type of creativity that we're going to talk about is quantum creativity. Situational creativity is the kind of creativity that many of us are drawing on this year in 2020. When we forget who we are, when we default to our conditioned patterns, when we get scared, when we get triggered, when we feel like there's too much uncertainty and we don't know how to navigate what's going on, we can very easily slip into our default state of being situationally creative. So situational creativity is in the moment. And sometimes that's necessary, right? If you've got a bear chasing you, you want to be situationally creative. Right now, in this moment, I need to run from the bear, right? It's reactive. It's determined oftentimes by our conditioning, our beliefs, our family lineage, our ancestral lineage, our experiences that we've had. It is, and it offers a short-term solution. It is finite, meaning you figure it out from your mind. It's the result of thinking, and it's reasonable. And reasonable is not wrong. Let me just say, I'm not judging reasoning at all. We need reasoning. Reasoning does amazing things like finds cures to viruses, okay? Reasoning is important and it has a role, but it's not the only way of knowing. It's a way of knowing. Fundamental creativity transcends our conditioning. It gives us those epiphanies, those ahas. Some of you call those downloads. You guys call those downloads a lot when I'm talking to you in classes. It comes from source. It comes from the quantum field, if you will. It is imaginative and possibility oriented, and it aligns with cosmic order, and it is consequently unreasonable. It's miraculous, if you will. It breaks free from the previous patterns. Our goal, in order for us to become more resilient and in order for us to fully activate our fundamental creativity, which is a much more expansive, much more pattern interrupting, much more possibility oriented way of creating, our goal to get through 2020 is to reconnect back with our fundamental creativity. Many of us have gotten lost in situational creativity. We're reacting to what's in the moment, or what's on CNN or Fox News or wherever you get your information or your data, or Facebook. We're reacting to it. And when we react to it, or we try to figure it out, or we look for answers, or we become convinced of something without being open to more possibilities, we're being situationally creative versus being fundamentally creative. Fundamental creativity allows us to break free from the past and to create something more new, more innovative, more inclusive, and ultimately something that incorporates the new metric of the quantum era, well-being, into the metric of success. So let's talk a little bit about, and I know for some of you this might be a review, but it's really, I think, good to review this pretty regularly because sometimes we forget. I want to review for you what I'm going to call basic quantum mechanics. This is a totally tongue-in-cheek because this has nothing to do with actual real quantum mechanics and physics. And so please don't send me hate mail because I use this phrase. I'm totally being tongue-in-cheek. I know it's not real quantum mechanics from physics. I'm going to break down for you the different parts that you are drawing on when you are creating in your life. The different things that you are creating from in your life. And you are always creating. You're creating right now. Right now, you are creating some amazing, amazing things. Take a look around you. Everything in your reality is there because you put it there. So you are living constantly in what we call the quantum field, or the unmanifest or non-manifest reality. So right now, at this very moment, you are swimming in an infinite pool of possibilities that are moving all around you. There's just multiple potential waves of possibilities zooming all around you. So many you'll never be able to count them all. You'll never be able to manifest them all. And that's pretty amazing in and of itself. You have, as part of your auric field or your energy field, what we call the mental and the emotional bodies. This is where you carry your conditioning. It's also where your human design chart lives. The energy, the actual design for your energy field lives in this auric field that you're wearing, if you will. So the mental and the emotional bodies is this filter that you have around you that's influencing what you see. It's influencing the opportunities that you experience. It's influencing how you create. It's influencing what you're willing to allow yourself to have in your life. And it's pulling into your experience things that are in alignment with the mental and the emotional body, the conditioning that you're carrying. When we talk about in human design, the doctrine of no choice, we have no choice when we don't understand what we're carrying in this part of your auric field. If you don't know what's in your mental and your emotional body, if you don't understand your human design, if you don't understand your conditioning, if you don't understand the impact and the source of all those places where, for whatever reason, you lost connection with your sense of value, the preciousness of who you are, and your right place and the gifts that only you can give to the world, if you've lost connection with those things, then you are being probably more situationally creative than fundamentally creative. And consequently, your choice around what you create, the choices you have, goes down quite significantly. We don't have a lot of freedom and a lot of choice when we're deeply conditioned, which is why deconditioning and healing trauma, anything that is keeping you from seeing your value, is so vital at this time on the planet, because we need people who are so infinitely creative that they can create beyond their past expectations and beyond their past experiences. The third component in our creative puzzle, if you will, is your manifested reality, your life right now. If we want to look at this in a more simple way, Think of it this way. You have this quantum field of infinite possibilities that's just waving around you all the time. You have your life right now, and in between your life right now and this quantum field is a filter. That filter contains your conditioning, your human design. It's your story, basically, the story of who you think you are, the story you tell yourself about who you are. That story is influencing which of the possibilities in the quantum field you are creating in your life right now. Consciousness is, of course, the rocket fuel that fuels the whole creative puzzle. The more we elevate our consciousness, the more we clear our conditioning and bring ourselves into greater alignment with the true story of who we really are, the more fuel we have, the more freedom we have, and the more choice we have over what we want to create in the world. So, quantum physicists know that when they look at quantum particles, the building blocks of matter, that those building blocks of matter are always in movement. They're in movement, and then when they're in movement, they're called a potential wave. When a physicist looks at those potential waves, those waves in the quantum field, they can only measure the movement or the location, but they can't measure the movement and the location at the same time. The movement of a quantum particle contains potential. So when we're in this living, breathing, moving quantum field and we can't see it, but we're in it, that's field of possibilities and potentials. Location, when we look at it, when we measure it, when we pay attention to it, when we focus on it, when we define it, when we give it meaning, that's when it drops out of movement into manifested form. Quantum physicists call that collapsing a quantum potential. Meaning, the meanings we give things, the meanings we give potentials, determines which of those potentials we create and manifest. So if you look at, going back to our very, very, very simple quantum mechanics model, if we look at your filter and your meanings, the meanings you have about ideas and your life right now in the infinite field of possibilities, you would see that in this filter, the meanings you have about things are going to influence which things and what kinds of experiences you're going to have with things as you bring them into your life right now. The meanings you have about life and archetypes and creativity and all the things you want to bring into your reality are determined by your conditioning field. And if you want to create a different state of well-being in your life, sometimes we have to change the meanings we hold. What does that mean? Our perception of the world determines what we create and the potentials we activate in the quantum field. So we're going to do a little exercise. As I know some of you have done this with me before, it'll be a fun assessment for you to see if your meanings have shifted at all. I want you to take a minute. I'm literally going to give you a minute. I'm going to set my timer here. And take a pen or a pencil, if you will. And I want you to, for 1 minute, just write down everything you can think of, every thought that comes to your mind around the word creativity. So what does creativity mean to you? What do you think of when you think of the word creativity? What do you think of when you think of the word creativity? Here's the piece that I really want you to hone in on. When we talk about creativity, we're not just talking about creative expression. We're talking about your ability to translate the quantum field into your physical reality. And here's the thing I want you to understand. You can't not do that. If you're not doing that, you're not here. You're gone. Okay? You're not incarnated anymore. So the idea that we are powerful creative beings creating this entire collective experience is so important. And it's so important that when we look at this as a way of being in the world consciously, when we begin to, through our understanding of who we are, consciously cultivate our creative power, we not only get to fully activate our potential, our personal potential, the full potential of our personal story, but we also get to activate that potential for others. I'm going to explain a little bit more about that later as we go through this. So here's what happened when I said the word creativity, or you saw the beautiful colored slide. The minute you saw this slide, your brain started releasing photons. Photons are light. So your brain started transmitting and experiencing and expressing and shooting out light. Those photon storms in turn caused your brain to create neurotransmitters. That's actually a physical, tangible chemical that we could measure if we took you into a lab. Those neurotransmitters created an emotional response that matched the meanings you have about the word creativity. So I read your words, Cindy read your words, when I heard your words and I read your words, everybody posted such amazing, delicious, creative words. That made my emotional solar plexus go, woo, these are juicy words. Sometimes if we are carrying wounding around our creativity, when we carry that wounding and we start thinking about, wow, I wish I could be creative, and it becomes a wistful thought or something we think is impossible, or something that when we think about it triggers our past experiences where maybe our creativity was shut down, then we create emotional energy that matches that meaning as well. That emotional energy from the solar plexus through the will to the G center programs the magnetic monopole. We all have within the G center a magnetic resonance field. And one of the things that has emerged as the human design chart itself has evolved over the last 400 years is our ability to be able to consciously calibrate this magnetic resonance field, which is the root of the law of attraction, and then pull into our lives things, experiences, opportunities, relationships that match the meanings we have in our mental and emotional bodies. The other thing I just want you to understand, think about this for a minute. You took photons, light, and turned photons into neurotransmitters. You just, and you're always doing this, by the way, you just turned light into matter. You created matter out of quote unquote nothing. That's pretty remarkable. That's how flippin' creative you are. All right, so photons are a part of our creative medium, but what inspires the movement of the photons in the first place? It's your story, your filter, everything you have in this filter, the story you tell about who you are, the story you tell about everything that's happened to you, the story you tell about why it's so hard right now because all the things that happened in 2020, or all the things that didn't happen in 2020, everything we tell ourselves, including our language, literally the words we use, because we know words carry words carry a vibrational frequency. And the words we use, when we're using high frequency words, we're actually changing our vibrational alignment. Everything that is in that filter that's causing you to think you are who you are, influencing the movement of photons in your brain. It's moving around the light, or it's hiding in the shadows, right? To create the reality you want to be experiencing, you've got to choose a set of meanings that match what you want. You are happiest and most abundant and magical in your current awareness when you're creating in alignment with your authentic self. And of course, with your unique energy blueprint, your human design, which contains a code for your soul purpose and your life purpose. Here's the other thing that we are just now we're at the very rudimentary stages of understanding this. DNA, which contains your unique code for who you are, which, by the way, the code for who you are, your DNA code, is contained within the design crystal of your human design. So your DNA code is actually encoded into your human design. That your individual DNA has its own signature frequency. And it's a frequency that nobody else's DNA has. You have your own DNA frequency. If you are living true to yourself, you're in harmony with that frequency, and it creates organization and well-being in your life and in your body. And if you're out of your unique signature, if you're not living true to who you are, if you're not being who you are, it's going to disrupt your unique frequency of energy, your unique signature frequency, and it causes disruption, disease, and all kinds of things in your life. I do not have the science for this yet, but I suspect we'll find it soon, that because we create non-locally and we can impact each other because actually we're unified in a field. When we look at studies like propinquity studies and happiness studies that say, if your neighbor is happy, you yourself have a 60% greater chance of being happy because your neighbor's happy. To me, I think that when we live in alignment with our unique signature, our unique DNA frequency, when we stay in that state of alignment, it spreads the energy of alignment and authenticity around us. And the people around us are entrained energetically, vibrationally into that same frequency of authenticity. And it creates a wave of possibility for the people in our field, the people who are impacted by our energy. This is a really important thing to understand. I have heard a lot of people all year talk about how it's heavy, it's down, everybody around them is getting them down, their frequencies are being dragged down, we're getting dragged down. If you understand physics, if we go back to high school physics, high frequency vibrations entrain lower frequencies. So if you've ever studied homeopathy, for example, you know that's a basic tenet in homeopathy. The higher frequencies pull up the lower. Lower frequencies of energies cannot pull the higher frequencies down unless we allow them to. And what I want to also explore with you tonight is, what are we doing that's causing us to lose connection with our essential frequency, our unique, vital, energetic blueprint that we're covering up and not allowing to be expressed out into the world when we let other energies hijack our own frequency, our own signature. We have more control over how we experience it than we think. So, of course, in order for you to activate and fully connect with your unique frequency, your unique signature, you have to know who you are. You can't be yourself if you don't know who you are. So you have to know who you are. And of course, I know that we're kind of talking about this very loosely in the context of human design. And I certainly could talk to you guys for days and days and days and days about human design. And you could go look up elements in your chart. And I want you to do that. If you haven't done that before, I want you to do that. And if you want to learn more about your human design, you can please visit freehumandesignchart.com. That's pretty easy to remember, freehumandesignchart.com, and you can get started in discovering your own human design. And I will have some things I'll talk about for you. It's just some resources to point you towards at the end of this conversation. But I want to start more broad first, because sometimes we get so lost in the little details of my chart has this and my chart doesn't have that, and I am this and I am that we lose connection with the bigger picture. And that bigger picture says we have to get as connected to the truth of who we are. And we have to decondition to the best of our ability and work our way to getting aligned with our unique signature frequency in order for us to stay resilient, in order for us to have more freedom, in order for us to be creating from a place of abundance and not lack. Because in a world that's going through this massive cycle of disruption, and it needs to go through the cycle of disruption, the purpose of the cycle that we're in right now is to take apart everything that isn't built on the idea that all living beings, all sentient beings are precious and valuable beyond measure. If we're going to build a world that is a reflection of what we know is actually valuable and actually precious, the very first step we have to do is we have to get reconnected with who we are, and we have to start building our resilience muscles so that when things come apart, which they need to do first before we can build anew, we don't get lost in the destruction. We don't get burned out and tossed about like corks on the sea because all this disruption is destabilizing. We have to stay stable ourselves as people who are here to hold the higher frequencies and bring the light. So again, who are you? You are your human design. You are your conditioning, and you can change the story of who you are each and every day. We see that in the G Center through the gate 13 and through the channel 1333. You have the power in any given moment, in any given flip of a dime, to change the story of who you think you are, to change your conditioning, and to live more fully and truly aligned with who you are. All right, so we have to talk about something very important. And this is a part of human design that we don't talk about a lot because it goes to a depth and a foundational place that sometimes I think we don't like because it does require of us that sometimes we have to do some personal exploration. Sometimes we have to do some excavation. And sometimes we literally have to retrain ourselves so that we get into the habit of telling the true story of who we are and get out of the habit of telling a story about who we are that isn't big enough, that isn't bold enough, that isn't authentic enough, that isn't aligned enough, and doesn't fully allow you to activate your true creative power. If we take if we take the human design chart, now I'm getting text messages that some of you like this slide a lot. I do too. Betsy created this slide. And now I'm going to take you to a slide that everybody hates. So buckle your seatbelts, or you're going to go see the ugly slide now. If we take the entire human design chart and we put it in a blender, and this doesn't matter what you have colored in or open. It doesn't matter what type you are. It doesn't matter what profile you are. It doesn't matter if you're left, right, whatever. If we take the whole chart and put it in a blender and we word it up, what we would see is that at the heart of the chart, at the heart of the human story, there are 9 core needs that every human being has. And those 9 core needs need to be expressed and experienced and lived out in the highest form possible. You cannot live according to your strategy and in great alignment with your authentic self if you are struggling with any of these 9 core needs. So tonight, what I want to do is review these needs for you, because it's really important for you to explore where perhaps you might be holding yourself back and keeping yourself from really being true to who you really are. All right, so I think we did this already. All right, we did that. Okay, I'm going to go through these 9 core resiliency keys, these 9 core needs. I want to encourage you to at least take a little note while we're going through there. Just feel, as I pull up a slide for each one of these 9 resiliency keys, just feel in your body if they hit you somewhere, if you notice something about them, if you feel them mentally, emotionally, spiritually. As I said, I will post on Facebook, and I can I'll mail the replay out tomorrow with the link. I will post the slides for you, so you do have an opportunity to go back and look at these. And there are videos about the resiliency keys on our website, quantumalignmentsystem.com. So if you go to quantumalignmentsystem.com, there are lots of videos about resiliency keys on there as well. So the first resiliency key, which I think is one that I find almost everybody struggles with in some way, shape, or form, is lovability. Can you feel, or do you feel like you can be loved and accepted for who you are? The second resiliency key is empowerment. Do you feel like you have control over your life? The third one is courage. Does fear keep you from fulfilling your joy? The fourth one is decisiveness. Do you know how to choose what's right for you? The cool part about human design is it does give us a little bit of a hack. The fifth one is emotional wisdom. Does emotional energy keep you from acting deliberately? Are you reacting instead of creating deliberately? Or do you compromise what you want in order to keep other people happy because you're so empathic? The next one is self-trust. Do you trust yourself? Do you trust your intuition? Do you trust the way you operate? Do you trust that you know what you need to know when you need to know it? The next one is vitality. This is a huge one. Vitality is your ability to fully express your vitality and your energy. If we're not experiencing vitality, we're burned out, or we're hiding out because we think we don't have the energy to do what we need to do, or we think we can't. Authenticity is the next one. Authenticity is the freedom to feel that it's okay, safe, important, vital, necessary, possible for you to be who you really are in the world. And last but certainly not least, self-worth. It's very difficult to create when we don't remember our value. Not only is it hard for us to create when we don't remember our value, it's hard for us to see the value of others as well, because our own lack of value clouds our perspective on value in general. So I like to organize these this way. This is super rudimentary, and you do not have to A, memorize this, or B, I would not get too married to this being like a strict formula, because humans don't make good formulas. That's what we learned in the material world, right? You can make formulas about chemical compounds, but don't make formulas about humans. They don't make good formulas. But the real gist of what I'm trying to say in this chart is that if you are struggling with vitality, if you are struggling with energy, if you're struggling with enthusiasm, if you're struggling with zest, if you're struggling with joy, if you wake up in the morning and your first thought is, oh God, I'm still here, or, oh, I just want to sleep all day, or, oh, I don't want to, I can't, no way. If this is where you're coming from, if that's how you start your day, there may be other stuff underneath that you've been working very, very hard to protect and defend or stabilize in these other 8 resiliency keys that may have caused you to use your vital energy in sustaining a hidden identity or a protective identity, or in trying to protect yourself and your self-worth and your lovability, to protect yourself from getting hurt. Here's a little mantra. I just threw this in here because I like the teal today. I was into the teal. So oftentimes when we think about getting things done and creating in the world, we tend to come from a place of will. Oftentimes we'll say a mantra that sounds something like, I am, I can, I will, I do. Willing is finite. When we use our will, our sheer will and sheer force and sheer effort, we can do that, some of us, in the short run, for a short period of time. But we can't do that for a long period of time. If we do that for a prolonged period of time, we run out of gas. At this stage in 2020, I suspect that many of you are running out of gas. We've been enduring and sustaining and willing and forcing ourselves to have to get through what has been a year full of unbelievable challenges. I want to invite you to rethink your creative model. And I want you to think about creativity happens when A, you are who you are, I am. It happens B, when we believe that we can, faith. It happens C, when we align with the possibility. We keep ourselves in a state of expectancy, of, I like to call it delusional confidence, if you will, that it can be part of our lives. And we hold that energy and we stay true to ourselves while we maintain that energy. And then when the energy is aligned and all the external signs indicate that the timing is right, then we do. If we alter this order in any way as part of our creative process, we run the risk of going back to losing our vitality. I am, I can, I align, I do. Put that somewhere important so that you remind yourself when you get overwhelmed and you feel like you have too much to do, or you can't get it all done, or you don't know what you're going to do, or you're uncertain. I am, I can, I align, I do. And ask yourself, when we start thinking about who you are, I am, who are you experiencing yourself as right now? You can change that. You can change that. And the more you learn about your human design, the more you can start telling a different story about it. So ask yourself, anytime you're dealing with a difficult situation, who am I experiencing myself in this moment? How am I experiencing myself in this moment? What story am I telling about myself in this moment? What can I do about it? Maybe nothing, maybe something. How will you align with the perfect outcome in this particular situation? What do you need to do to get your energy back in a state of alignment? And then what are you going to do? But here's the part that I really want you to explore. When you think about aligning, I'm going to give you a quick hack. It's a fun technique that I learned. Actually, I learned this technique from a sea turtle. And that's a story I don't think I'm going to share with you because it's kind of weird, but I got this lesson from the sea turtle. All right. So here's what I want you to think about. Anytime you're working on aligning before you do, think about your life as a timeline. Right now we're in 2020. Don't panic because I put 2025 on the screen. I want you, anytime you need to align, to put whatever it is you're wanting to create way out on the timeline. See yourself in 2025 having already experienced what you're envisioning. The job, the move, the house, the creative fulfillment, the service, the transformation you want to bring to the world, the message you want to share. See yourself out on a future point in that timeline and look back at yourself where you are right now and send a message from 2025, if you will, back to you in 2020. Tell yourself from 2025 what you need to hear in 2020 to know that in 2025 it's all okay. Use your future memory to bring yourself into alignment with what you're creating. And then if the timing is right, go do it. Go do it in real time. And if the timing's not right, that's okay. Just stay here with the alignment piece. Stay here with the vision piece. And keep holding that. That's what alignment is. And that's the muscle we really need to be cultivating right now, is that ability to hold that vision, even if we can't see it yet. So I want you to remember what you do on an individual basis is a microcosm within a macrocosm. And your part matters. You staying aligned matters. What are we going to do? What can you do? Number one, to activate your creativity, the first thing I want to encourage you to continue to do, and I know many of you have been doing it all year anyway, is I want to encourage you to heal, clear, decondition, and align. There are many, many, many ways to do that. I'm not married to any one system. I don't care how you get there. I don't care if you stick crystals on the top of your head and dance naked on a beach. Do whatever works for you to get yourself healed, cleared, deconditioned, and aligned. And most importantly, do whatever you need to do to drop into a perspective on yourself that sees yourself as an irreplaceable, vital part of the cosmic plan that is a once-in-a-lifetime cosmic event and is inherently valuable because you're breathing, because you exist. Number two, use your abundance to increase the abundance of others. Giving and sharing gives us a sense of empowerment, and it actually cracks open the heart chakra. It cracks open the G and the will center, and it leaves us more open, more expansive, more aligned with not only our own good, but the greater good of the whole. We are moving into an era where we are going to have to co-create, collaborate, restructure, and unite and reform. We are entering into an era in the next decade that will be marked by the emergence of a long era of sustainable peace. And that peace will be built in harmony. That peace will have built into it restitution for the crimes of the past and equitability that is fair and just for every sentient being on the planet. It's coming. It's in the design that it's coming. It's in the stars that it's coming, literally. May you use your creativity to strengthen and heal not only your own personal integrity, but the integrity of the world. Thank you for being you. And thank you for everything that you do. Because there's only one you, and you make us who we are. And if you are not here doing what you do, we can't be who we are. So I'm going to post, not here, but I'm going to post on the Human Design for Everyone Facebook page, and I'll mail this out tomorrow, a little 6-minute visualization that I want to invite you to take some time and just explore and experiment and be with. It's a really lovely visualization that embodies all of the changes that are coming ahead as our charts shift and change and grow in this shift that we're in as we move more deeply into the quantum era. I want to invite you to co-create with me in holding this vision on a daily basis. This is a vision that I hold every morning as I come into my office first thing with my coffee. This vision goes very well with coffee. And I want to encourage you to savor it and enjoy it and maybe put your own spin on it yourself.
Leo had commented that she's going through a tough time. She feels like there's too much uncertainty and she's feeling scared. She's wondering how to get back to that fundamental creativity.
So I think you, and probably I would say if we had a show of hands, I think a lot of people would be showing their hands. So, I think that the first piece that I might lovingly and gently say to you to look at in the context of fear, and this isn't always easy, but is there something you need to do for yourself? Extra sleep, walking, going outside, breathing, meditating, getting onto a habit of some kind, making sure you're drinking enough water, making sure you're eating well. I know this sounds really rudimentary, but sometimes when we spin out into fear, we forget to do the most important simple things that we need to do just to take care of ourselves. The second thing that I would recommend that you do we're kind of in the middle of a master alignment session, and I don't know if I know you've done one of those, Lael. I think you've been in there before. We have a master alignment session going on. Actually, we have one going on right now. We have a couple more weeks left in that, and I would encourage you to join us there and do some tapping along with us using EFT and the resiliency keys. I think that's a great piece for you to do. I don't want you to not acknowledge your fear. I think, there's a lot of, I don't want to use the word bypassing because I think this is a word that's also starting to get really weirdly overused. And the other one is like toxic positivity. I am not saying to deny your fear, to not look at it. I think that when we resist it or we try to make ourselves wrong, particularly I think in our community for having fear, that it makes it worse, not better. So I certainly would allow yourself to sit with it for a little bit and talk to it. Ask your fear, what are you trying to tell me? Fear is a signal. It's a signal that comes from the spleen. And the signal from the spleen is usually giving us information about our survival. And sometimes because we're a little bit more complex than basic animals, our response mechanisms and our instinctive responses can be very complex and sometimes, just very complex is just a good word for it. So I would encourage you to just really sit down and talk to your fear and ask it, what is it trying to tell you? What is it trying to protect you from? And what do you need to know so that you can leverage it and not be paralyzed by it? And see if talking to it doesn't help. And as I said, make sure you tend to the basics. The truth is, I think we'd be lying if we didn't say this wasn't on some level a scary time. It's been a scary time. There's a lot of things coming at us. And it's very, very normal for us to be looking at it and going, what's happening? What's next? How is it going to play out? I think maybe many of us have made decisions this year that we normally would never have made because of fear. And sometimes that fear is important. It's protecting us. It's causing us to pay attention so that we do the things we need to do to make sure we stay safe and aligned. That's not wrong. Walking around and pretending like nothing bad is happening and only visualizing the happy outcome and ignoring the signals, the very real signals that maybe there's some action we need to take to preserve our lives so that we can be okay and continue is normal and it's healthy. Your life is very precious and it deserves to be protected. And that's not just about staying alive. It's about staying abundant. You deserve to stay abundant. So start with those things. And certainly I would say, reach out to us if you get stuck and you need extra support, please reach out to us and we'll see where we can plug you in and get some support for you. Okay.
Thank you. Michelle asked, does that boil down to being more aligned with self-love? And I think that she was talking about was the filter you were talking about between us.
Yes, totally.
All right. Donna loved the idea of the future memory. She loved that term. Louise asked, what are your best tips for maintaining consistent confidence to follow through on our creative inspirations?
You're not going to like my answer. I would say do it even if you don't feel confident. And that's terrifying. But here's the thing about fear. And it might benefit you guys if you're on the Facebook page, on the video. There's a video archive on the Facebook page. And I think if you use Control F, you can search the archive. I did a series of videos on fear and on the spleen, the fear gates of the spleen. That's a really great video to go watch and watch it with your chart, because you'll see actually some specific configurations that are in your chart that might really be influencing your experience of fear. Fear itself, unless you're really literally being threatened, your survival's being threatened, existential fear, like I'm afraid to express my creativity, is really actually not a life-threatening thing. So the only way usually through that kind of fear is to push through it and do it anyway. So courage, not having confidence is kind of fear, but I would definitely say push through it and do it anyway. Don't let yourself wait for confidence to kick in before you go try it. You will be quaking in your boots. But what will happen is you'll start getting enough experience under your belt to know that, oh, every time I bump up against this, if I let myself back away from it, I'll never do what I want to do. I want to tell you something that, and I may be really overstepping my bounds on this, so please forgive me. Or I'm always hesitant to share this kind of stuff, but I have terrible confidence. And Betsy can tell you, Betsy works for me, and Betsy's also my niece. That, first of all, when I did my TED Talk, I was like, okay, nobody can watch it. That's it. I did it, right? But then I was like, and nobody can watch it. I had to force myself to send my family and my employees, my own children, the link to my TED Talk, because I was like, okay, I recorded it. I'm done. I don't want to know anything about it. I don't ever want to see it again. I don't want anybody to ever watch it. I don't want to know anything about it. It's very frustrating at this stage in my life to still have to duke it out with my terror of being seen. So I just want you to know that the one thing I have learned over the years when I buck up against this thing inside of me, my dark monster of fear, is I have had enough experience now to know I just have to do it anyway. Because if I don't, then I won't do the TED Talk, or I won't write the book, or I won't do Facebook Lives or whatever. And then I feel much, much worse when I don't than if I'm terrified and do it anyway. So I know that if I push through it, it dissipates. And I've had enough practice doing it so that I know that if I do it, it dissipates. So do it and find a good rhythm with pushing through the fear. Make friends with it and do it anyway. Don't let it stop you.
So much easier said than done.
Yes, totally.
Oh.
Totally.
Imane asked, how do you balance the reasoning part, for example, a lack of material finances and trusting the quantum field?
Okay, so that's a good one, because that is a place, this will be my last question, and I promise I'll let you guys go, but I want to address this because I think I have watched for decades people duke this one out. There is a phrase that I learned a long time ago from a man named Dr. Christopher Ian Chenoweth, and he calls it standing in the gap. And basically what he said is, you have faith, but where you are right now, there's kind of a gap, right? So you might have faith in the quantum field that it's going to get better. It's going to work out. It's going to be okay, right? But in the meantime, you're standing here going, I don't have money for rent. I don't have, you've got that thing going on, the real life situation. So the trick is figuring out how to span that gap, right? The first thing you're going to do is align, right? You're going to define yourself. I am, I can. You're going to work on your attitude and your deconditioning and your everything else. You're going to align. You're going to see it as a possibility, right? But then here in this part, in your physical world where you are right now, you're then also going to do what you need to do in the meantime. I'll call it spanning the gap. Sometimes I also call it Band-Aid creativity. Sometimes you got to go do what you got to do in the meantime while you're still holding faith. There is nothing wrong with getting a day job, if you will, or needing to do something temporary while you're waiting for the dream to manifest. And I think that somewhere along the way, and I'm not sure where it started, but whoever came up with this idea of do what you love and the money will follow, maybe, not always. And that's not a crime, and that's not wrong. And I think there's something in our community that measures your awokeness with how you manifest and how much you manifest and how much you create. And that's still measuring consciousness with numbers. So what I'd like to see you do is hold the faith, but tackle what's going on in your material world at the same time. And I know this also sounds hokey, and I will say that sometimes I'm the worst person at this. But gratitude and taking a retrospective stock of everything in the past that has worked, all the times when you were supported, so that you can start, especially those of you who are very reasoning oriented, who are very logical by design, those of you who are very logical, who are always battling self-doubt and wanting to have the proof, if you look for the proof in the past, you'll start seeing there's a pattern there of you being supported. You might always be supported in the way you think you should be supported in this moment. That's the faith part. But that if you do a retrospective, you could find a lot of evidence that you've probably been pretty supported along the way. So find the gratitude, find the places, the parts of the story where things have worked, hold the faith about the future, and then in the moment, go do what you have to do as much as you can. With the awareness that it's just a Band-Aid. It's not the end, and it's not failing. It's not failing, okay? Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining me. I hope it gave you a little bit of inspiration and peace and some things to connect with to keep you moving forward. We got big work to do on this planet, and you're a part of it. You're here for a reason, and you chose this time in particular. So I'm glad you're here, and thank you for all that you do. And thank you, Betsy. I miss you. Bye.